Reactive Training Systems.
Actually, I guess I have an interesting scenario. So this guy emailed me, and he's only been lifting for like a year. And he emailed me and said that he's done about 5 competitions in his first year, like only lifting for a year. And he's done 5 competitions in his first year, and he really enjoys USAPL. He wants to be more active in USAPL, and he intends to do 5 to 6 meets per year. And he's in his 40s or 50s, I can't remember exactly. And I'm like, why do you want to do that many competitions in a year? It's too exhausting. I really only recommend, even for the most novice or advanced lifter, 3 is it, unless there's some particular reason why you have to do more. So I guess that it's just kind of ties into what we're talking about today is how would you approach a novice lifter, beginner lifter, in terms of preparing them for competition, and then how would you treat an intermediate lifter or an advanced lifter in terms of scheduling competitions throughout the year? What's too much? What's just right? Keeps them fresh and ready and prepared for competition in our off season and whatnot.
It's funny because I've been talking to a bunch of old timers who can't understand why you'd need more than 8 weeks to peak for anything. And so that talks to the frequency that they've been competing in the past, where, funny enough, they think that we're currently too precious with the minimal number of competitions that we have. So it would be normal to have, and then you take a look at it would be normal to go 6 competitions in a year. Then you take a look at a high school lifter who is lifting every, in Wisconsin or Texas, they're lifting every weekend.
At competitions?
Yes.
Why?
Why not?
But why? How do you have time to prepare how do you have time to gain strength if you're always competing?
You're gaining strength while you're competing. It's a different way to look at it, but that's the way the season works. Well, it would be the same thing, I think about this with football, with any other sport. You have an on season and off season. The problem is that their seasons go from, say, right after football season up until March. So they have a very truncated season, and that's their whole season. That's where they compete. So I don't, I've been thinking lately we should have a higher frequency of competition, balance it out a little more, so we're not going full all out, but there might be a little more control involved in what we're trying to accomplish at a meet.
Well, are you talking about how many meets you host per year? How many competitions your lifters do?
Or allow my lifters to do.
Yeah.
Either which way. So I don't know. I think there could be a season. I think there could be more frequency in competition. I mean, that might be good for somebody. So say your 40-year-old who's just getting into it, maybe they need the skill and the experience. Maybe they're not going to, be peaking in the same way and hitting the same PRs at every meet, but maybe there's something else to be gotten out of it. I don't know.
I mean, I definitely, if I look back on, my introduction to competitive powerlifting, I probably did I think I did 5 competitions my first 2 years, just because I was, you can put on 100 pounds on your total from competition to competition in a novice stage. When you're still a beginner, but then it starts to wear down, and the competitions start to weigh on you because everything gets heavier, everything becomes more competitive. So maybe in a novice type of way, it's not that terrible to do that many competitions in a year. But I would say that as you get older in powerlifting or become more advanced, the competitions start to weigh on you physically and mentally, at least in my experience. I was just getting tired of always preparing for competition, and then I wasn't looking forward to competitions anymore. So
yeah, matters a lot. I agree with that. I think it's more level dependent. I mean, a younger guy or somebody with less competitive experience needs the practice and so forth. Like you said, a lot of times it takes 2 or 3 meets for them to get kind of the dumb mistakes out of the way. Hopefully 1 meet, but maybe more than that, jumping the snart commands and that kind of stuff. But then, like, for me, it doesn't really even make any sense. Why would I compete in a local meet other than just for fun? I get
Yeah.
like nothing out of it other than just for fun.
Other than taking someone else's first place away from them.
Right, which, you know, that's how great can you feel about that? You know,
Yeah.
some novice lifter, you're going to rip him off of a.
I actually remember that I've had, you know, I realized that very early on in my powerlifting career, because I had just done like RPS and I had done Raw Unity. And then I asked my coach at the time, I said, what's next? Like, how do I, like, competing on a stage with like people like international lifters was so much fun. What's next? What's the next best competition in the United States? And he was like, oh, the Arnold. And I was like, well, let's go to the Arnold then. He's like, well, you have to qualify. And I was like, well, how do you qualify? And he goes, you have to go to nationals, but first you have to do a qualifier for nationals. So that was my first experience with the USAPL meet, which was 4 weeks after I'd done Raw Unity, which was very close. But I went into it, like, because I'm so competitive, I went into it saying, I have to win, I have to hit PRs, blah, 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 blah. And like I out-totaled people, and that Paulie was there. And I think that was the first time Becca drug tested me out of many drug tests that Becca has put on me. We've shared the bathroom many times. And I just remember like out-totaling people, and my handler was just like, chill out, Rory, like, let these people like enjoy their competition, you know, like, this is not, you know, like, chill out. I was like, oh God, you're right. Like, it's not, you know, at some point it's like the higher level lifters are kind of taking away from the fun of winning something for like a novice lifter at the local competitions, you know.
In terms of like how many competitions you should do, though, I usually don't see too much of a problem with people, you know, tending toward the higher level competitions that they're qualified for. But as far as how many can you do, I think the absolute maximum is got to be determined by how long your training cycles, you know.
Yeah.
If you take somebody, like I've got one lifter who seems to be like 10 weeks to peak, you know, then you couple that with transition phases and stuff like that. Like, yeah, the maximum that person should do is like 2 or 3 meets a year probably, you know. But you take somebody who's 3 weeks to peak, has shorter transitions and all that, then they can compete conceivably a lot more frequently. You just have to balance that out with the other impacts, the psychological impacts that you mentioned. And, you know, the fact that when you do a competition peak, there's a bit of a longer transition on the back end. So you're not getting as many peaks per year. And that decreasing that number of peaks per year probably does have an impact on your overall rate of progress as well. So that's kind of all things to keep in mind, and a balancing act to do from a coaching perspective, I think.
That's why I
develop a questionnaire that asks things about how happy or sad would you be if you didn't put more than like X amount on your total every time you did a competition, and like ask all these questions related to, I mean, it would just be a very long questionnaire at that point when you're asking all these things, but it's, you know, it's stuff to consider when you're getting to know your lifter, just asking them like, would you be okay with only putting like 7.5 kilos on your total? Or, you know, do you want to see every time you do competition, do you want to see 20 kilos on your total? You know, so that would affect, you know, I was so used to seeing like 30 pounds, 40 pounds on my total in the last 2 or 3 years that I've competed. And then I go to the Arnold this year and I only put 2.5 kilos on, and I was like, this is awful, you know? So, you know, I think those are all things to consider, and it's personality and it's the likes and dislikes of the client also. So.
And it's partly what you get used to. Like I remember, I guess I was probably technically more of an intermediate lifter. I'd had a few years of lifting under my belt, but still in that stage of training. So I started lifting weights fairly seriously when I was 12. So I had, you know, 5 years of training experience, and I was 17, you know, and I was still gaining strength pretty rapidly in that time frame, you know. And but I remember kind of extrapolating those gains in perpetuity, thinking like, yeah, you know, I'll just keep adding adding this much to my squat every year, and I'm going to squat 1,000 pounds, and this will be great. But later on, you kind of, reality sinks in, I guess, that's not how it works, and you get used to it, and so your expectations change as well. So I think that's kind of part of becoming more seasoned as a lifter, just the modification of expectation.
And I mean, and that's even, people always, I think that I just did some type of interview for a New York State chapter. They like put out this survey, I don't know, interview thing that they did on me. And it's like, what have you learned, or like what's different now than when you first started powerlifting? Like, how do you look at it differently? And that's definitely it. It's like changing your perspective on things. In the beginning, it's just about adding pounds to your total. And now it's more about the experience and what your expectations are. And maybe it's not necessarily the number that you hit on the lift, but it's the total and qualifying for something else. So it's just changing your expectations and changing how you view things in relation to your performance.
Yeah, and wait till you get to be a master's lifter, like an advanced master's lifter. Then it's like, well, can I keep from going backwards this year? Then that's a improvement.
Yeah,
no, that's a big deal. Is fighting attrition. I mean, at that point, you're shrinking. Everything's going against you, conspiring against you to make you weaker, and there you are trying to get stronger. And for a lot of people, it seems to be working these days. So. Good luck, Mark. Yeah.
We kind of say that tongue in cheek a little bit, but there's a lot more truth to it than maybe we want to admit at first. That
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. We say a lot of times to focus on process, and that results come through a focus on process, and it's a long-term game, and so on and so on. But the way I see it is that in the beginning, you can afford to be more focused on results because results come a lot easier and it's easier to see and so on. But as you progress in your career, you have to adopt more of a process mindset. And sooner or later, we're all going to reach some point where you're as strong as you're ever going to be. And that's what it's going to be, and I think to keep in it beyond that, which is something that personally appeals to me, you have to have a focus on process, and probably to the point where process is your experience, like that's what's left, So anyway, my 30-second take on life cycle of a lifter, I guess. But
well, look, I've seen it a lot just from coaching masters over the years now, where it processes everything. A lot of times we're just waiting for somebody else to make a mistake, and then we can quietly slip ahead. And a lot of people do make mistakes between the coaches and the lifters. There's a lot of mistakes out there, and when, especially if you're getting to M3s, M4s, sometimes you need that tiny opportunity to pull ahead, and that's it. But yeah, so it definitely shifts from, say, a 15-year-old who's just banging out PR after PR at every single meet, to someone who's just like, we have to wait to be very surgical with what we're extracting from our lifters.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more, like you said, I think it's a lot more mental game or thinking game, because okay, what if I go up, can I slowly go up a weight class? That'll give me some gains. Just any means to get some forward momentum, because as long as you're moving forward a little bit, at least you're not going backwards. So
yeah.
But when we talk about masters lifters, we can't just talk about masters as advanced lifters, because if you took someone who, and this happens, I mean, I think, Mark, you're working with Sandy right now, and she just started lifting within the last year. She, even though she's almost 70, right? She has the potential to still make a significant amount of progress, because she's a novice lifter. At some point, that's going to slow down. So, you have to remember, when you're talking about the age or life cycle of a lifter, it's not related, not 100% related to the age of their physical age. So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
You know, anybody who's a novice lifter who has never touched a barbell is going to make significant amount of gains for the first couple, depending on their age. It could be the first couple weeks, it could be the first couple months, it could be the first 2 years, you know, depending on their age, sex, and their body weight. So we can't forget, for those who are listening to this, that just because the person has an age assigned to their body does not mean that that's their powerlifting age.
True.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of direct us back toward training a little bit, and especially since we started talking about competition pace as a novice lifter. Let's talk a little bit about training as a more novice lifter. And I kind of wanted to get some, I guess, some perspectives from you guys on what are some key differences that you see as a lifter goes from a novice level to an intermediate level to an advanced level. And maybe we should even start by talking about what do those levels even mean?
Well, I think that the levels mean their ability to adapt to the stress that's placed on them during training. So, and how quickly they adapt. You know, as a novice lifter, you can adapt very, very quickly and can continue to add stress every training session until at some point you don't recover and adapt as fast as you did when you were just beginning training. So at the point that recovery and adaptation slows down, that's when the programming needs to change. And I wouldn't necessarily say that you just change someone from a novice type program to an intermediate type program. There's definitely things within the novice range that, you know, you can be like an advanced novice or an intermediate novice. So yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuances there. Like Rory was just talking about prior, you've got the lifter's age. I mean, we can't assume that all novices are young people. Some young, and there's chronological age has to factor in there as well. And I don't know, it seems like to me that the more advanced at whatever age they are, the more advanced the lifter is, and I agree with you about the stress, you know, the stress being the absolute limiting factor. But when you know, it's different if you're lifting your body weight, say you're squatting your body weight, or somebody that's squatting 1.5 times their body weight versus somebody that's squatting regularly 2.5 times their body weight, or something like that. I think that's a lot more, whatever the rep scheme and set scheme, everything else, that's a lot more stressful. And then you add in the chronological age factor into that as well. And I think those things have to be taken into consideration as far as the training.
Well, I have a question. So someone who's squatting, well, I mean, this is another way that we can look at advancement in as a lifter is if someone's squatting 2.5 times their body weight, at that point, would you say that they're probably not a novice anymore?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is something that I've seen a trend in just general like programming, for not specific to RTS, but just generally, is that you might have someone who weighs 180, a male, like a young male in their like 20s or 30s, who's 185 pounds and he's squatting 135 pounds, but he's doing an intermediate program. Like that is a telltale sign that that person is not intermediate yet if they're 185 pounds in their 20s or 30s and they're squatting 135 pounds. So that person would probably benefit more from a more novice type program than jumping into something like the Texas method or 531 and you know, other RTS type program.
Yeah,
other things out there.
That's kind of what I was getting at is the program needs to fit that lifter's level and chronological age, which, you know, and there's some other nuances in there as well, but Like,
right. So if you had a 75 or 80-year-old man who was squatting 135 pounds, you might say that that might be advanced for him, you know, because he maybe just started like a year ago and he's worked really, really hard to get to that 135 pounds, but he's 85, you know, so
yeah.
that, you know.
And a guy like you were talking about, 185-pound young guy that's squatting 135, that guy, you probably can't hurt him. You could throw anything at him and he'll be all right, because he's, you know, the weights he's using are low enough relative to his own body weight that he's going to be pretty darn durable. But you get a more advanced lifter, you got to be a lot more careful, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think the injury risk goes up with advancement. One thing that comes to mind whenever I think about this for myself, though, is that I don't see how my process changes. You know, like some of the inputs will change, but even if you take, you know, the stereotypical novice lifter that we were just talking about, I still think that, you know, I'm gonna take on that lifter. I'm going to, you know, assess them in terms of their abilities. Even like we think of like weakness analysis and stuff like that as being more of an intermediate or advanced tool, but I would do it even with a novice lifter. It's just that what's most likely to come out of that is that movement proficiency is probably the main weakness. So they're not going to be using a lot of special exercises in that case, but things.
So I just want to define what you're saying. You're talking about as novice. You're talking about someone who's never touched a barbell and is coming to you for programming.
No, we're the more. I think what we're talking about in terms of novice lifter is kind of what you were talking about. Someone, young male, 185 pounds, squatting 135. If I'm working with someone like that, and I suppose, you know, if they've never touched a barbell, well, the first thing you have to do is teach them the movements, right? But once they have, you know, a basic movement proficiency, the process of training, in my eyes, is pretty much the same the whole way through a career. You know, it's just that the things that you analyze and the data that you get back out of the lifter's response is going to change pretty dramatically. But you know, the process that you follow, I don't see how that changes too much.
I agree, Mike. It's just, I think you got more, I think you have more leeway for error or whatever. In other words, there's a best or an optimal way to train somebody like that, and then there's, you know, better, best, whatever, good. And I think there is an optimal way, and we try to do things the optimal way, obviously, but you've got more leeway there than.
Oh, certainly. So
I have a question though, and this is not me like completely trying to challenge you, but let me ask you a question. So you have someone who's like not really, they can squat 135 pounds, they weigh 185 pounds. They've never really had like very specific programming, but they've been like using barbells in their gym situation, and they want to become a power lifter. They want to get into powerlifting, do powerlifting competition and whatnot. Now, in the way that I treat a client or a patient who's injured or, you know, just coming to me for strength training, is I utilize the minimal effective dose, because down the line we're going to have to change variables in order to continue progress. So I'm seriously asking, like, why would you put someone on an emerging strategies type program when they're going to respond to any stimulus because they've never had a specific program that they've been on? They haven't trained the barbells very seriously. And if they can get away with 3 sets of 5, 3 times a week on the squat, adding 10 pounds every session for 8 weeks, why would you put them on an emerging strategies program when down the line, when they can no longer add 5 pounds every session, 2.5 pounds every session, they're going to need something to change the stimulus in order to continue to progress. So why would you put them on something so advanced or intricate when it can be very simple in the beginning and they can make tremendous amounts of gains, and then when they can't make gains anymore, you change the stimulus. So if you have a more advanced stimulus from the beginning, what do you change it to?
Why couldn't you use a linear progression with an emerging framework?
Well, I think that's what I do, but I don't, because, you know, like we've talked about before, is that when I work with clients, I have them start utilizing RPE, not to assign the number, but just to assign an RPE to the number that's assigned to them because of the linear progression. And then we watch that, you know, so is that, I mean, but do you have—
That's 100% how I would introduce somebody to RPE based training, you know, is like when I give seminars and stuff and we introduce this concept of RPE, it's always, you know, don't just jump into it with both feet. You know, you have to just keep doing whatever program that you're already doing, just practice rating your RPE. And then someday, you know, the day comes when you're doing a set and this set is always an 8 RPE for you, and that day it's a 7.5. And you go, man, this is always an 8, and today it's 7.5. I wonder if I ought to add a little bit more weight to the bar. And it's like when you start having those kinds of thoughts, then you're ready to move on to a more RPE-based program. But what I'm saying, and so this is a problem that I run into quite often. The programming that I write and the process, the framework that I'm talking about is not a program. It's not a frequency. It's not a volume or intensity approach. There's no methodology to it. It's a framework. It's a way of thinking about your progression. And you could do a linear progression if that's what's most appropriate for the lifter. And Rory, I know you and I have put several lifters on linear progressions when that's warranted. And then there are other times when you don't need to do that, or that's no longer appropriate, so you move on to something else. I've had lifters where I'll put on an upper-lower split, or I wrote a couple posts recently about one lifter that I've got who's on. So we usually think of 1 microcycle every week, and I've talked about and written about a little bit people who do 2 microcycles a week. I've even gone the other direction. I've had one lifter do a microcycle every 2 weeks. So, I mean, there's really an infinite amount of combinations that you can put into this, but the framework being just a process that places a value on the coach paying attention to the lifter's needs and adapting the program to fit that. I think that's, you know, where you need to start. And, you know, if that's a linear progression, maybe even only training the lifts once a week. If that's appropriate, then that's appropriate, and let's go for it, you know. But it's the same process. As far as I can tell, it's the same process that would then later lead you to the conclusion that, hey, this person actually needs to train the lifts with a small baseline dose in every training session, you know, like I've got Bryce Krawcheck doing now, you know. So I think having a consistent methodology throughout the life cycle of a lifter is an advantage because of what you were talking about, like how there's gradients of advancement, you know. So you could be a novice lifter, but it's not just a novice lifter. There's kind of rankings within the novice category. Well, if there's one framework to fit all of that, then you get the advantage of you know, kind of seeing what the lifter responds best to over the course of their career. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So now my question is, taking that framework and putting together a program for a novice. So let's say, like, let's keep talking about this 185-pound, 25-year-old who is squatting 135 for 3 sets of 5 and hasn't really like ever trained the barbells, but he can squat 135 for 3 sets of 5 pretty easily. What would his program look like for you from day one? For maybe the first, what would you anticipate his program to look like for the first like 4 weeks?
Tough to say, because that's not a demographic that I end up working with all that much.
Right. So in the way that I generalize the term novice is that's like the actual novice. And then hit that person about 6 to 8 months later is probably the advanced novice. So I work with that range of clientele. Like I'm a high percentage of the clientele that I work with is that, and then they transition into the more intermediate and advanced over the length of the lifetime that I've been working with them.
I suppose what I mean though is that it's not an impossible solution or anything, but I just don't have a lot of general tendencies because most of the people I work with tend to be a bit more advanced than that. I mean, process wise, I think you still start with this assessment. Like, if we're talking about volume or frequency, it's like, going back to what you were saying earlier, what volume or frequency does this lifter need to create a positive training adaptation? And some novices need a very low training volume, but then other novices need a more significant training volume. And I think a lot of that has to do with their sport background in general. If you take someone who has an endurance training background, you wouldn't consider them trained in the barbell lifts, but their work capacity is going to be a bit higher and they're going to need a bit more volume. So you've got to start them somewhere, but then as a coach, you've got to pay attention as well and see, well, this doesn't seem to be a sufficient stimulus for this person, so we need to turn up the volume, or this person's getting wrecked, we need to turn it down. You mentioned a linear progression in the beginning. At least I don't see any reason not to do that. I would take one of the things that I think I would do differently than what a lot of novice programs, not necessarily coaches, but novice programs seem to advocate, is I'm going to look at, the lifter's just basic movement proficiency. Can they maintain their technique as they get tired, as the weight gets heavier, things like that? And one thing I would expect to see pretty often is technical degradation. And if that happens, then I would have no problem introducing, I guess in our vernacular it would be assistance exercises, but things like pause squats or slower tempo squats or things like that. And not just squats, other movements as well. But you get the idea. Things that are designed to help them improve their basic movement proficiency.
When I tend to see that in a novice lifter, so what I do with my novice lifters is I correlate RPE to what they're doing in their training. And then typically I see that breakdown happen when the RPEs tend to climb. And then for me, instead of transitioning to assistant work that addresses those technical breakdowns, I change the squatting frequency and the squatting load. So usually I'll introduce a light day so they have more time to recover, and that increased recovery time translates to better performance or technical performance in the next session. I might change the loading progression. So if they've been adding 5 pounds per session, I might drop it to 2.5 pounds per session. In a female on the upper body lifts, I might drop it to 1 pound or 0.5 pound per session. So, I really, really, really stress wearing out the squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press as far as you possibly can by changing the load, the intensity, and the frequency before you add in supplemental or assistance work to address insufficiencies in movement.
I would totally agree with that as a tool. So in the paradigm that I was laying out, my implicit assumption was that the competition lift is still being trained. And absolutely, the competition lift, the practice of the competition lift provides the basis of your progression anyway. So if you're seeing a technical breakdown, if you're seeing some sort of a problem there, then you do have to control that to the point where it has to be a challenge for the lifter, but it also has to be a challenge that the lifter can meet, a challenge that they can succeed at. So that absolutely has to get manipulated at that point. So if they are seeing technical breakdowns with, you know, higher RPE sets, then you've got to lower the RPE, but not so much that it's too easy for them. You know, I think it still needs to be a challenge, but you know, you have to find that line. I would just take it further than that and say that there are other things that I would bring to bear to help improve the motor learning for that movement.
So something that I've been doing lately for people that are at least training in my gym, and for ranked novices, is I've been introducing set ranges. So I'll have them work 3 to 5, 3 to 6 sets of something, and we'll watch for technical breakdown. So some days they'll get through all, you know, so it's still more or less on a linear, but they're not assigned like a hard 3 sets of 5. It'll be 3 to 5 sets depending on their capacity for the day and the stress and the weight and everything else. And then we'll have them assess where they are as well. But what we're watching for as coaches are technical breakdown more than anything for a novice lifter, because usually they're not going to fail from strength, especially if we've selected the right loads. But the set ranges seem to be an interesting thing that gives them enough to kind of push their capacity, which is another way of course, you know, so introducing RPEs.
Pushing capacity is a really important thing, because a novice lifter, it's going to be easy for a really long time, and then all of a sudden it's going to be hard. And the first time a lifter experiences a hard rep is like pretty scary for them. And oftentimes what I'll see is the person like hits the sticking point. It feels a little bit harder than it's ever felt before, and then they give up on it, like without even a shot. It's just like whoop, and comes right back down. So that's like, it's always interesting to see that happen with a novice lifter. And then you have to have the talk about shit gets hard. You know, it's not going to be easy forever. I just had this conversation. I work with this 17-year-old. She comes to me twice a week, and she's a soccer player, and we squatted 105 pounds, and she did 2 sets of 5. And on her last set of 5, the last rep got a little bit hard, and she just put it down like right away. She's like, I can't. And she put it down. And then we had a talk about, you know, experiencing hard lifts and how a hard lift will make you stronger. And it's just a very interesting experience for a novice lifter to feel that. And then I say that they're not 100% like a strict novice anymore, because that hardship makes them stronger and advances them. And that's the same thing that happens to us in life. Like, you know, there's that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know, like the more experience you have in life with like hard things and overcoming hard things, it makes you stronger. So I don't know. I just felt like adding that.
Yeah,
but I think that kind of correlates with what Polly's saying in terms of like the 3 to 5 set range. You know, if something's like super easy, they'll know it's easy and they can go for that 4th or 5th set, and then they might feel something harder on that 5th set.
Yeah, and it kind of eases them into that experience a little bit more.
Yeah,
I'm always trying to I feel like people milk a linear progression way too long. You know, I see people who, you know, and on the long side, I've seen people on a linear progression for 2 years, and I know that's ridiculous, but it's people milk it for too long, and I like to kind of try to accelerate it a little bit more by introducing some of these things, or maybe taking a slightly larger jump in between, where they're still refining their skill, but they don't necessarily have to go so slow, or it doesn't necessarily have to be so easy for so long. I think that works when they're under the supervision of a coach. You know, I think the way that the traditional linear progression has been written, it's lowest common denominator, lowest effective minimum, like just lowest effective dose. But I think we can accelerate that a little bit. Going back to another point, I think that the emerging can work too, because essentially it's the same idea. Like emerging can work for a novice because it's the same idea as a linear, if you're encouraging people to go up just a little bit each time. Like they're assessing.
Mike and I have talked about how I implement this like emerging strategy idea with my novice lifters. And I've even talked to Mike about, it's interesting because I did a strict linear progression when I first started powerlifting, and I hit I can't remember if it was 3 sets of 5 or 5 sets of 3, but my linear progression like came to an abrupt end at 212 pounds on the squat. And here I am years later coaching lifters through the linear progression up until intermediate and advanced programming. But I've taken, and very specifically, I talk about Elise Smith, one of our RTS clients, who after her 6-month layoff due to injury, we started a linear progression again. And I took her squat from like 45 pounds because she was injured, all the way up to 275 pounds for 5 sets of 3, or 3 sets of 3 at that point. I don't know, but it was 275 pounds. And she weighs less than me. She's taller than me. And it's just, you know, when you look at someone who's such an advanced lifter at a high level, and where I ended my linear progression, but then, and I didn't have any sense of what RPE was. I didn't pay attention to anything. And we keep talking about paying attention. My gut feeling as to why Elise's squat got so progressed so far with the linear progression is because I paid attention to all factors in terms of quality of movement, RPE, her recovery, what she was telling me, and we adjusted and manipulated the reps and the frequency of loading to continue to progress her linearly as long as possible until we just really couldn't progress that anymore linearly.
So you even go as far as like manipulating load, taking steps back if necessary, and you really manipulate a lot of, like, it's not just a straight simple linear progression, zero thinking involved. You're pretty hands-on with how you adjust those variables, though, right?
I don't think my goal is to never take a step back. So I wouldn't want someone to do like 3 sets of 5 up to 225 and then deload the weight in order to continue to progress. That top load that the person has used will always continue to increase as far as possible. Like, I don't want that to take a step back. So I'll manipulate something like giving them a light day or changing the rep scheme or switching to an upper lower split so that they have a heavy day and a light day. You know, I think if I do like a standard squat 3 days a week, initially it'll drop to a light day in the middle. So they're still having 2 heavy squat sessions a week. And then after they can't progress that anymore, it's 1 heavy squat session and 1 light squat session a week. So the frequency actually drops because it allows them to recover a little bit more. And then I even use like I'll convert back to, or I'll just kind of skip that upper body split and keep them on a 3-day progression, but have like a heavy, light, medium. And then at that point, they're considered a little bit more of like that advanced novice or intermediate lifter, but they can still progress linearly. And the way that they can still progress linearly on that heavy squat session every week is by watching, paying attention, looking at the RPE, looking at the quality of the movement. So that's how I kind of like transition them from a novice to intermediate lifter, but still linearly progress them.
I see. So kind of with that in mind, let's shift gears a little bit, although we're running a little short on time, but we can touch a little bit on what you consider an intermediate lifter to be and how that differs training wise from what you do for a novice lifter. Mark, we haven't heard from you in a little while. Do you have any thoughts you want to weigh in on here?
Oh, that's kind of a really arbitrary thing.
Distinction. Yeah,
distinction. I mean, you can classify on Welch score, you can classify, you know, I always heard this old adage: if you can squat and deadlift twice your weight and body and bench once your weight, you're considered intermediate, which is very crude. But
I mean, there's always exceptions to the rules. I think that that's like a pretty good standard or starting point for defining, you know, advanced or not advanced. But you also have to look at the lifter's response to training, and you have to look at like, are they just like gifted and they can bench twice their body weight because they're just strong as shit, you know? So
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
exceptions to the rules.
that. Yeah, that's a very crude approximation, and I think it's kind of an arbitrary. I don't think it's a, like at this point you stop being a novice and you become an intermediate. It's more of a continuum
Flow, yeah, it just
throughout your.
transitions very nicely.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe the distinction would be when they cease to, like going back to what I was saying earlier, like these two young high school guys I was training, they just started training with me and Chad doing what we were doing, and I knew that was fine because, like I said, basically couldn't go wrong with them. They're going to make gains no matter what because they've got so much potential ahead of them, and the weights they're using are so light, relatively speaking, that just about anything we did was all right, and they did. But at some point, those gains start slowing down, and you have to start paying more attention to, well, maybe you shouldn't do pause squats. Maybe you should trade those out for squats with chains, because you got this going on and stuff
Right.
like that. And that's, of course, once you get past all the technical proficiency issues, as you mentioned, I think that's kind of an underlying prerequisite for being an intermediate lifter is you've got to have pretty good technique.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
I I'm with you. I think for the most part, and again, I tend to shy away from a lot of the categorization in a general sense, which is kind of why am I bringing this up then? But I think that's an advantage of having a consistent process throughout a lifter's life cycle is that, okay, so there's not a clear distinction between beginner, intermediate, advanced. There's not, a lot of preconceived rules that need to be in place, especially the further along the lifter's career that you go. So if you have a consistent process in place that rewards you for paying attention to the lifter's response and taking into account emerging information and things like that, then when one thing stops working, you'll be able to kind of go back to the training log and look at things and see, okay, these are the types of things that this lifter responds to. So you can make some educated guesses and bring in some new experimentation and continue to progress that lifter along without kind of relying on some of the more, I guess, arbitrary distinctions between classifications.
Well, I think that you can look at there's going like the rank novice, the definite intermediate, and the definite advanced. You can look at them and categorize them by their ability to adapt and respond to loads, and how they recover.
I don't know that you can though. Like that would be a thing that I'm not sure that I agree on. Like I hear, and I don't know that you're making this claim, so absolutely correct me if I'm wrong. But I hear people say things along the lines of like a beginner is making progress from session to session, and intermediate's progressing, week to week, and advanced is month to month or sometimes multiple months. I don't see that at all. I work with some of the most advanced lifters in the world, and we see progress session to session. It, to me, depends on how close are you looking for progress. Mm-hmm. Like how are we defining progress? So, I mean, I see, highly advanced lifters that train with really low volumes and frequencies, and then some highly advanced lifters train with really high volumes and frequencies. And I just don't think that there's a lot of, we can generalize a little bit, and I think it's most easy to generalize with your beginner lifters, your novice lifters. But I think even that, the generalizations
maybe it can be defined by, you can define an advanced lifter by the differences in response at that point, like time to peak, progress session to session, how much they can respond to, like how much volume they can respond to, frequency that they can respond to. Because I'll typically find that a novice lifter can respond to, like any novice lifter can respond to the same amount of frequency, volume, low progression. And there's really no time to peak, because you can put them in a competition at any point during their novice year and they'll hit a PR.
So what you're saying sounds like the difficulty in finding a successful training strategy.
Yeah.
For a novice, it's pretty easy. Like what Mark was saying, basically anything works. But then as you progress, you've got to narrow your focus.
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that sounds like something I could generally get behind.
So I'm gonna plug my RTS classroom, but in my RTS classroom, I was talking about making the progressions between the old like guild classifications between apprentice, then journeyman, and then master, and so a lot of it is time related, and a lot of it you're doing the same thing, but it's how effective you are, like you said, Mike, with the process. So I think with a master, and not master in age, but just master in time. They've been doing this long enough where we can almost effectively predict how they approach the process, how they execute the process, and that actually helps us predict what the results are going to be, more than a novice who might skip parts of the process. They might not fully understand what's involved in the training, and they're going to be less predictable, a little more erratic. Yes, they'll get stronger, but we don't know the ceiling of their gains. We don't know, how they're going to respond from session to session. But I think as we settle into training, and Mike, and I'm sure you've seen with your advanced lifters, you have a much better sense of what you can expect from them from session to session, as opposed to, say, a novice lifter. Novice lifter is like just gains galore, right? It doesn't matter. It's like they're going to just add a ton of stuff, and they're going to be like, well, I kind of took a liberty, and I added another 50 pounds to my squat, and still an RPE 7. You're not going to get that out of a master.
Right. No, I like that. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So maybe we're just using a different set of words, but I think it's kind of, to me, a little bit easier approach to say, like, a lot of times with the guild classifications, you'd have to be an apprentice for 7 years. You'd have to be, there's certain requirements, and then you couldn't even call yourself a master until you worked for somebody for, another 10 years or whatever it is. And then at that point, you could possibly call yourself a master, and it depends on who's under you as well. So
yeah,
that maybe it's a little more, a little more vague, but I think to me, I like the
but I think it is vague.
Yeah.
I think that as you go from novice to advanced, it becomes more vague.
Yeah.
Because that transition, maybe your deadlift becomes more advanced than your squat sooner, So I definitely think that it's vague. I like that analogy a lot.
Yeah.
And the question
is, that heuristic techniques like that work well. I mean, especially when we keep in mind that they are, rules of thumb rather than absolute criteria. That's one of the dangers with, not just this, but any time that you start to apply numerical criteria to things, people have a tendency to think that there's precision there that may not actually be there. So it's something else to keep in mind. It's if it's this many years to be an intermediate lifter, well, that's a rough approximation. So I think if you have a heuristic method, it tends to emphasize just a bit more intrinsically that, hey, this is a rough approximation. It's not an absolute, and it's going to vary from case to case.
And I think our definitions will change and evolve the longer that we're involved in what we're doing. So your definition will change the longer that you're a lifter. The definition will change the longer that you're a coach, and so on and so forth. And it really, it's important to see like, who does this classification apply to? Like, who's looking at the classification as well? So if we're talking among ourselves as coaches, our classifications might be a little bit different than, say, lifters talking amongst themselves. But we have to end up with a common language at some point so we can effectively communicate.
Sure. And I think, you know, a coach's experience matters a lot here too. So, you know, I mentioned earlier that I don't have as much experience with, you know, real beginner lifters as I do with, you know, higher level lifters, middle and higher level lifters. So although I may disagree on some of the principles, and I might, like, if I had an actual beginner lifter come to me and wanted to work with me, then I would approach that in the way that I would approach that. But still, I'm gonna, I think it would be smart to rely on the experience of people who have more experience in that field. And I think that should go into people's decision-making criteria in terms of who to work with. You know, that one thing I teach at seminars as well, as far as, like, if you're looking to hire a coach, you should look for the two criteria that you should look for are, do they get me results? And do I enjoy working with them? And now, if you haven't ever worked with them before, you don't know if they'll get you results, but you can look to see if they get people like you results. So people that are, you know, similar weight, body type, experience level, drug status, on and on and on and on, right? The more closely they work with people of your same type, then I think the more sure you can be of that decision. So anyway, that's definitely off topic, but I thought that would be worth throwing in there.
No, I think that's true. I mean, like, you wouldn't want, like, if you were an advanced lifter, like, if you've been lifting for a very long time, you've competed on the national stage, and you're qualified for worlds, would you want to work with a coach who only works with novice lifters? No.
Right.
You know,
right.
So, you know, I think that
it's easy to get romanced in the other direction, though. You know. That,
oh, absolutely.
You know,
and I also think that it's the duty of the coach to screen the person appropriately and say, I don't think that you are the right fit for me. And I've definitely done that. Definitely recommended other coaches instead of myself, because
you might want to work with
someone who can handle all your 35 emails that are 10 pages long every week.
I was actually going to suggest that, you know, as a coach, I think you should have a referral list, you know, so if you have somebody that's not a good fit for you, that you can recommend somebody that might be a good fit for that person, you know. Yeah. I know that I always appreciate, you occasionally will see that, you know, just in the world, you know, you go to a store and ask for something and they go, well, we don't have it, but here's where you might be able to find it. You know, that's always appreciated.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's all the time that we've got for today. Appreciate all you guys and all your time. Thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll see you guys next time.
Reactive Training Systems.